Hi, I'm Ubanga and I'm developing a game where you build a town on a tiny planet that can be played in VR. In the previous episode, I built a system to procedurally generate my worlds. I showed you how I generate points on a sphere using the Fibonacci sphere algorithm, triangulate the mesh, how I distort the terrain using noise, create biomes and trees, water, and how I created the background. In this episode, I want to work on basic camera controls, mainly zooming in and out and rotating around the planet. I also want to do the basic setup for VR. Let's start with that. Our player needs a couple of hands. So I opened up Blender and modeled a hand primarily using the skin mesh modifier. I then created a few base poses, also in Blender, and then proceeded to connect it all in Unity using the animator and a simple script. Now our player can make basically any gesture they want with their hands. This was mostly just for fun though, because I probably won't use all these animations in this project. However, let me know in the comments if you want me to do a longer video where I do a full tutorial about how I made the hands and how I set them up. I tried using the default Unity XR rig, but I ended up altering it so much that I decided to start over and do it all myself. It's a really great starting off point if you're making a more traditional VR game where you have to walk around and stuff, but it doesn't really work with the control scheme that I have in mind. Another issue that I have is that when you move your hands quickly, it looks a little bit jerky. I remedied that by not setting the transform of the hands directly, but instead lerp them first. So if you shake your hands now, it looks a lot better. Putting on the headset and seeing this low-poly world that I made floating in front of me was pretty awesome, but it could do with some interactivity. So let's work on that. Besides being playable in VR, I would also like it to be a normal mouse and keyboard controlled game, so that more people can play it and I don't have to put on the headset every time I want to test something. I might also want to add controller support at a later time, so I made sure that it would be relatively easy for me to swap and add control systems. For my quality of life, I created a little script that detects when I put my headset on and automatically switches between PC controls and VR controls. Human head movements are a little bit jerky, so to create nicer looking VR captures, I created the third camera that smoothly follows the VR camera. I want to preserve the day-night cycle, so when the player rotates the world, I want the sun to move with it, but the star should stay in place to provide an anchor point for the player in virtual reality. I spend a lot of time creating, trying and tweaking different control systems. I want the controls to feel responsive, but at the same time I want them to feel dynamic and playful as well. For PC controls, I ended up with a system that allows you to click your middle mouse button and drag your mouse around to rotate the world. I take the delta mouse position, so basically the velocity of the mouse, and use that to set the rotational velocity of the planet. Besides just rotating the planet, this also allows you to flick the planet into a spin, which then slowly drags to a halt. It's pretty fun to do. I want to preserve a sense of up and down. To do that, I limit the vertical rotation by not letting the player rotate past the pulse. And to make it feel a little bit nicer, I smooth out the rotation when you almost reach the limit. In VR, I want to do something similar, except it's not that straightforward. To rotate the planet, the player presses the right grip button and moves their controller as if spinning the planet around. It's easy to get the velocity of the controller, but this is relative to the player's room origin. So if the player physically moves around the planet in the room, you end up with some weird behavior. The solution for now is to project the velocity of the controller on our plane that I create between the planet and the player. The zoom controls on PC are pretty straightforward. You just scroll the mouse wheel and the camera moves in and out. In VR, I want to use a similar interaction as zooming in and out of pictures on your phone. Zooming starts when you press both the grip buttons on your controller. You zoom in by moving your arms further apart, and you zoom out by moving your arms closer together. However, Just moving the camera or the player closer to the planet or further away wasn't really what I had in mind when I thought about zooming in and out in VR. So I also scale the planet up when you zoom in, making the player feel smaller, and scale the planet down when you zoom out, making the player feel bigger. This feels really cool. Although it's way less pronounced, I use the same system for the PC controls just for consistency's sake. At this point, I thought it would be cool to show off what I've been working on to my family and friends, so I spent way too much time trying to get this game running on my Oculus Quest 2. I don't know what I expected, but of course the game wouldn't run. To get a decent frame rate, my world couldn't be much bigger than 500 nodes, where I want to use actually 5000 nodes, and I had to turn off all the cool effects such as the post-processing, the atmosphere and the water. When I finally got it running, I was pretty devastated. I had spent all my spare time for the past 2 weeks battling OVR and Android build issues and removing all the things that make my game look nice, and I was about ready to give up. But when I turned everything back on and tried to play the game connected to my PC and saw my little world again, I liked it too much to give up now. So I decided not to target mobile VR for now and just finished the game for PC and connected VR. If the gameplay is actually fun, I can always come back and try to optimize it for the Quest later. But I still had my profiler open and I saw something curious. Even on my pretty beefy PC, I had some big frame rate spikes. So I did a little bit of digging and I found a major flaw in my thinking. By scaling and rotating my planet, I'm modifying basically all the objects in my scene every frame, including a physics sphere collider for every node. This has a huge impact on performance. The fix is pretty easy in concept, but pretty difficult to get your head around while implementing. Everything, including the player, needs to scale and rotate around the planet instead of the planet rotating and scaling around itself. This way, the planet and everything on it that doesn't move, which accounts for most objects in my scene, can stay static. So after about a week of trying to think inside out and backwards, everything is working again and my frame rate is a lot better. A fun and notable issues were the stars. If you don't scale them exactly right with the player, you get a pretty effective vomit machine in VR, but at least it validated my instinct to make the stars an anchor point for the player. I've yet to try it, but this might solve a lot of my issues that I had on the Quest. And although I'm super tempted to try, I might hold off on a Quest build for a while. It takes a lot of time and it's really demotivating when it doesn't work. I want to get some actual gameplay first, and then we'll see how it goes. So yeah, I think that wraps it up for this episode. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this content, and subscribe for the next episode where I will be starting work on the build system. Thanks for watching. Bye!